No, he's gone.
Good morning. Friends, we're getting ready. We're going to get started. Rick, would you raise this a little, please?
It's an excellent time to find a seat. That means you, Leon Dunkley. That means you, David Pyle.
Do you sing?
That means you, Scotty. That means you, Don Southworth. That means you, DCO. I'm not above being bossy from the pulpit. Everyone knows that, right? Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to be together today. I am Reverend Megan Foley, and I am the regional lead for the Central East region of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It is my pleasure, as always, to see an event that started as just a mere comment. Why don't we have regional presidential candidate forums turn into an actual event? So it's wonderful to see you. And up here with me is the Reverend Abi Janamanchi, who is gracefully hosting us today and will say a few words about where to find stuff.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning. Welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. We are delighted and honored to be able to host this forum today. I welcome you all here. We are, I think, well equipped to host a large gathering like this. Just to give you a sense of where all the bathrooms are, which are important, which are to the right of the sanctuary through the hallway, and then there are also bathrooms downstairs and to the left as well in the office suite. And you may already have encountered the lounge where we have set up refreshments, and also I think that's where lunch is going to happen. And beyond that, I think we are good to go. Thank you again. Welcome.
Thanks, Abi. Cedar Lane has been such a generous and gracious host to this event, so thank you so much to Abi and to Sarah Deschler and to the team of folks who are not only volunteering but working today. Really, it's wonderful to have a place that we can so reliably come to with our regional events and large gatherings. So I wanted to spend a few minutes just looking at the agenda for today. You can pick one up if you'd like. It's pretty simple, but we've adjusted a couple of things. So one of the things that we're doing in this new world that we live in is live streaming this event all around the region. So both groups are gathered around the region and also individuals are watching it, including a group of youth in part of our region, I think Schenectady. So I'm pleased. Sometimes you'll see us sort of try to greet those folks as we all get used to new things and new ways. That will start in a couple of minutes, so just so you know that's happening. The lunch situation. So I'll talk in a minute about events of this week and how things were changed at the last minute. So one of the things that changed was a whole bunch of registrations came in yesterday, which was after our deadline for the food. So we're gonna approach it with a loaves and fishes mentality. We know there's going to be a lot of food. We assume there'll be something for everyone to not starve. If you did not arrange for food beforehand, please don't, and you want to stay for workshops, please do stay for the workshops and grab yourself a bite to eat. We will have enough for everyone, I'm sure. Let's see, we covered all the good stuff. So it would be remiss of me not to mention the events of the past few days. Many of you may already be aware that our UUA president, Reverend Peter Morales, is resigning his position effective today as a result of the controversy over the UUA's hiring practices and lack of diversity in our senior leadership. In just a minute, Reverend Mary Katherine Morn will explain a bit more about what will happen with our leadership in the wake of that resignation and offer some other comments. I wanted to take this time to remind you of the Central East region's ongoing commitment to dismantling white supremacy and institutional racism, while at the same time acknowledging that there is much to learn and much to do. I joined the UUA staff a couple of years ago because I am called to create organizational systems that work for those they serve, and because I believe a strong structure helps promote and amplify our hopes and values in a world that needs us. This is a challenging time for the institution I am pledged to serve and to improve. What's exciting about today, amidst all of the challenge, is that we get to have a glimpse into the next chapter of what our UUA will be. And I'm glad we're together to share this moment. Thank you for coming. May I introduce and welcome back to DC the UUA's Director for Stewardship and Development, Reverend Mary Katherine Morn. Welcome back. No, Justice.
Good morning. I am so glad to be with all of you, colleagues and friends from Central East and beyond. This feels so much like home to me, and you look a lot like people I love. This right here is surely one of the best places to be a Unitarian Universalist. As Megan has already said, it's been a difficult few weeks for some of us. The lived pain resulting from patterns of institutional racism, including hiring practices within our association, has been shared openly and urgently. This pain, of course, reflects generations of injustice, not just a few weeks of conversation. So the pain of our unfulfilled commitments to dismantle racism is something long familiar to many. Our association's inadequate response to the most recent expression of outrage added harm upon harm. Peter came to believe that his part in that would make it very difficult for him to lead the listening, growing, learning, organizing, healing, reconciling, justice-making work that needs to be done. Of course, the responses to his resignation and to all of these events are many and varied. We all hope that Peter's difficult decision will open a new way for racial justice work in our own house. We thank Peter for his service and send prayers and good wishes to him and his family. We thank those Unitarian Universalists of color whose courageous voices have led the way. We thank them, and we offer our prayers for the pain we have caused them. While many feel shaken by this change in leadership, I have also heard many expressions of hope and resilience from Unitarian Universalists around the country. I believe that many of us right now are doing the important work of remembering what the UUA is. The UUA isn't Peter, just as Cedar Lane isn't Abby, Rockville isn't Lynn, and Accotink isn't Scotty. The UUA isn't an office somewhere in Boston. It isn't the staff. It isn't one congregation. I had planned to be with you today, in fact, to say just that you and your best values and aspirations together are the UUA, that your congregations together are the UUA, that our children and their curiosity and their kindness are the UUA, that emerging, innovative, creative communities like the sanctuaries are the UUA. We are even beginning to understand, and hopefully not too late, that people of color, people with disabilities, people who are trans, and many others who have not found a truly welcoming home in congregations are the UUA. All of that is the UUA in the fullest and best sense of it. And of course, the UUA is the credentialing bodies that review and affirm religious professionals. The UUA is also people, Megan Foley and David Pyle and other UUA staff who work in every corner of the country, serving congregations and religious professionals. The UUA is the United Nations Office, the Declaration of Conscience, Standing on the Side of Love, OWL, Summer Seminary, Multicultural Youth and Young Adult Leadership School, General Assembly. The UUA is also our partnerships with groups like Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, UUs for Social Justice, DRUM, Allies for Racial Equity, State Legislative Ministries. The UUA is what happens when congregations support one another in times of crisis, when a building burns, or a banner is stolen, or a young person dies of suicide, or we show up together at the Supreme Court, or the White House, or the State House because we remember that we are better together. I wanted to remind you of this so that when I thank you as Director of Stewardship and Development for your financial support of our UUA, you will understand me, and you will see what a difference you make with your support. Through the annual program fund and regional dues, you make every bit of that possible. Through your ministries and congregations and on the street, you make all of that possible. Through every loving and challenging call for doing better, you make all of that possible. Thank you. Ordinarily, I would tell you a little more about the annual program fund. I would let you know there are changes coming. I would call out your congregations who are honor congregations, and I'm happy to do any of that with you one-on-one during the breaks or at lunch. But let me say thank you. I am proud to have lived and ministered in this area before moving to Boston and the UUA, and it's a joy to be with you today. As we stop and listen together, as we give thanks for courageous colleagues who stand up and say, I will lead. We give thanks for their vision and their courage, and for this moment, this opportunity to be together in faith. Amen.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Mary Katherine. I also want to explicitly welcome the vast parts of our region that are coming to us from all over the place today. So most of you by now are aware that our region encompasses the entire Northeast except for New England. And so we have a large group of folks in Charleston, West Virginia. We've got a lot of folks all over New York. We've got a lot of folks in Ohio, and they're all here today with us in this room. So please take a moment to think of them and expand your sense of ourselves here, not just to DC, not just to the greater DC or Baltimore area, but to a vast chunk of our Unitarian Universalist world. We're glad you're with us. I want to start us in a moment of prayer in solidarity with the Day of Sacred Resistance with the Black Lives Matter movement, which very interestingly coordinated with today as well. Today in Washington, D.C., and at satellite locations around the world, spiritual leaders, practitioners, people of faith, and all those who value the sanctity of humanity are joining together to summon our collective spiritual energy. Folks around the country are praying and chanting and singing and dancing and meditating and drumming and invoking the sacred in order to drive out hate, oppression, and fear and usher in the spirit of divine peace, justice, and love. They say that people of all faiths and those with no defined spiritual practice are participating, so of course they must mean Unitarian Universalists. I think it is one of those striking worship moments that this was planned for before we had this past couple of weeks, and I hope you will join me in a moment of prayer and solidarity. Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Teresa Inez Soto writes this: "All of us need all of us to make it." So I want you to get used to those words. Make that your prayer. All of us need all of us to make it. This is why Unitarian Universalists support the Black Lives Matter movement. Please take a moment to center the struggle for Black lives in your thoughts. Say it with me, loud or soft. All of us need all of us to make it. In a world where some of us are targeted for struggle and brutality, where others of us benefit and flourish, we pray. All of us need all of us to make it. In a world where powerful people of ill will and indifference make us fearful for our safety and our futures, we pray. All of us need all of us to make it. In the excruciating space that lives between seeing and naming and hearing and changing, we pray. All of us need all of us to make it. Make a picture in your mind of someone you aren't very happy with right now. Look at their face in your mind and pray. All of us need all of us to make it. Unitarian Universalists believe that all of us need all of us to make it, and this is why we are in solidarity with the movement for Black lives today and every day. Amen. I'm delighted that Justice Tuya from All Souls Church is here to introduce our moderator, Jim Key. Justice, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Central East Region and Cedar Lane, our most gracious hosts, welcome and thank you for participating in the Better Together Central East Region Leadership Day and UUA Presidential Candidates Forum. We are pleased a number of you are able to join us, both here and remotely, for this particular event. Today, we are joined by Jim Key, moderator of the UUA, and the three candidates for president, the Reverends Susan Frederick-Gray, Alison Miller, and Jeanne Pupke. Jim will facilitate and moderate today's exchange. Jim was elected moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association at the June 2013 General Assembly to a single 6-year term. As moderator, Jim chairs the UUA Board of Trustees, facilitates the business sessions at General Assembly, and serves as Chief Governance Officer. He consults regularly with leaders and administrative bodies at the national, regional, district, and congregational levels. Jim has served our faith from the ground up, helping to serve a new congregation in Beaufort, South Carolina, serving as its president for 5 years. Vice president, then president of the Thomas Jefferson Southeast District, he facilitated the organizing meeting for the southern region of the UUA and served on several committees at the UUA that included chairing the UUA Audit Committee. Jim is married to Liz Key. They have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. Please join me in welcoming Jim Key, the Reverends Jeanne Pupke, Alison Miller, and Susan Frederick-Gray to the stage.
Let me add my thanks both to the region for sponsoring this Presidential Candidates Forum and to Cedar Lane for hosting. And I'll add my welcome to those viewing us live stream. Before I introduce or have the candidates introduce themselves and explain how the forum will work, let me just address the events of the last few weeks. I was deeply saddened when I got the call from Peter just a night or two ago, and I thought his agreement to resign showed great grace to allow us to move forward as we repair our social injustice issues. It's clear that the racial diversity of our staff, plus the board and our congregations, does not reflect our values nor our policies. My heart has been broken over and over again with the letters from scores and scores and scores of you, many calls and messages and text. Hundreds of religious professionals and others have shared their heartbrokenness and their call for us to do more. Today, I just want to suggest to you that the board is responsible for naming an interim president, and we'll meet this weekend to begin that process. More importantly, we'll hear from the staff at our April board meeting and begin a process of moving forward. But today is about the candidates, and the Board of Trustees. Therefore, I'm present to do this facilitation because the Board of Trustees felt it was an important role of governance to support the presidential candidates' exchange with you all. So this is all about living out our 5th principle this morning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. This morning is for you to meet the 3 candidates for president of the UUA, hear their vision and their answers to questions you've submitted. I have a lot more questions than we'll get to, but we'll try to get to as many as possible. I think you'll agree at the conclusion of today's forum that we have 3 very competent candidates from which you should choose. They will introduce themselves, which will be followed by questions that you've submitted, the participants. The candidates will have 5 minutes to introduce themselves. These opening comments will be followed by questions with 2 minutes for each candidate to respond. I have a timekeeper, Jim, that will help us stay on target. The questions have been solicited, and there were some coming in this morning, which I'm still synthesizing. And we'll get to as many as time permits, and I'll pass them on to the candidates should they wish to address some of them via their campaign websites, in fact, if they haven't addressed them in their comments this morning. The candidates will then have 4 minutes for their closing statements. And through a selection of straws, we've determined the rotation here, and we'll rotate through the morning. This is the first time that candidates for president will serve a single 6-year term. This is also the first time the voting will be accomplished electronically. There is a handout on the table. Some of you may have gotten it. It's also online. I would encourage you to get one and understand it. It is a new process and therefore might be challenging. But let me go over some of the things that I think are important for you to know about that. On June 24th, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time, delegates at General Assembly may scan their GA name badge at voting kiosks in the Great Hall of the New Orleans Convention Center. From those who are off-site delegates or that will vote absentee have from June 1st to June 24th. Delegates unable to vote in person may access their election ballot by following the voting link found on their delegate credential document, which you'll get from your own congregational process. Delegates unable to vote in person or online may request a paper ballot. Requests must include a copy of the delegate credential document and postmarked by June 1st. Completed ballots must be received by June 14 or postmarked by June 12th. So as I said, these are being brought to you by your Board of Trustees, the Board Secretary, the Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs, and the Chair of the Election Campaign Practices Committee, the Reverend Manish Mishra Marzetti, have been working with the candidates and the staff as these forum and the electronic voting procedures have evolved. I should note that the UUA board some time ago put in motion the move to electronic voting, and it has taken some time to ensure that there was a vendor who could protect the integrity of the process. So now, let's meet the candidates. And I'll ask that the candidates introduce themselves, and we will begin with the Reverend Jeanne Pupke.
Good morning. I am Jeanne Pupke, and I am both a member and the senior minister of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Richmond, Virginia. And I stand here today because of a long series of unanticipated events, not the least of which is walking into the First Unitarian Church of Portland, Oregon, after a long, long search, and being greeted and hearing gorgeous music and lovely preaching that challenged me and invited to coffee. I'm sure it was the coffee. There I was a lay leader for many years, including being on the board. Off I went to seminary. I attended Meadville Lombard Seminary in Chicago, was ordained, and while I was finishing those studies, I did an internship on Bainbridge Island, and I served the district, the Pacific Northwest District, as its growth minister, and also I then served the congregation in Bend, Oregon, which was tiny. Because of that, and because I now serve one of our largest churches, over 700 members, I have arrived here committed to do this work. I would like to be your president of our association. And here is why I would like to do that. First of all, I have served on your board of trustees, and I know a lot about what's going on. I served as the finance chair of the board. You may remember me standing in front of the General Assembly, addressing you on matters that many people think are very arcane, but I think are vital for the health of our faith. I arrive here because the congregation I serve does not have an option whether or not to do the work of anti-racism. We are Richmond. We are ground zero for American racism. We have 3 times in our history failed. First, in the receiving of slaves. Second, in the secession from the Union. Third, in that horrible time of interposition where we argued no one had the right to force us to integrate our schools. And yet I come to you from a place in which the members of my church have shown me over and over again that there is a new day rising. Could this be any more important in the presidential race than it is right now? I think not. I think, in fact, what we have been learning with each other, and believe me, we are learning still. What we have been learning with each other is essential information for the work of the day. Part of the reason I'm running is because of what I always knew were the statistics of the leadership of the Unitarian Universalist Association. I'm not surprised, but I am ready. I'm an ally with allies with allies with partners with partners. I know that my first intuition should always be to find people with whom to go into conversation and deliberation. I know this is not a problem to be readily solved, quickly fixed, but that anti-racism is the work of a generation. Many of us will not be here to see it come to a fruition. But above all, I know it is the job of the president to hold up and name where we are going. And friends, we have a chance now that we have not had in 50 years. We are going toward a beloved community. We are going toward a place where everyone is included and welcome. And we are newly aware of how urgent this is, for too many people have suffered too long. I know how to make change. My career in business, in church, will all help us lead ourselves home. Off we go. Will you join me in this work of anti-racism?
Thank you, Jeanne. And now let's hear from Reverend Alison Miller.
My name is Alison Miller, and this is my home region, so I'm so glad to be with people beaming in from all over, including New Jersey, where I live and serve. I have over 27 years of experience serving with Unitarian Universalists, with all of you in our largest congregations and in our mid-sized and small congregations, online and in campus ministries and young adult ministries, in some of our most innovative emerging ministries, in our justice ministries on the streets, and supporting our largest prison ministry, as well as working at the UUA headquarters. I want to take all of this experience and everything that I have learned about leadership and service with you in times of challenge and in times of success, in times when we have grown and in times of grief, in order for all of us to say a stronger yes to our faith, to the faith of Unitarian Universalism. Ours is a life-saving faith. I have witnessed and experienced it myself countless times. It is a personal saving faith. And I'll share one example. The Covenant Circle or small group ministries that so many of our congregations offer us intimacy in a time when people are more and more isolated and burdened with their feelings of hopelessness. Well, there are days when the life-saving aspect of that ministry are more alive than others. In my congregation, Eleanor Mason arrived at the home of another elder, Fred, to pick him up for the Covenant Circle, and he did not answer the door. And she called and called repeatedly until he was able to knock the phone to the floor and call out for help. And she called the ambulance, and the ambulance came in time for him to receive life-saving medication. There are days when our life-saving message is clear. Or not only am I the minister of the Morristown Unitarian Fellowship, I'm chair of the board of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, another one of our congregations. And our prison ministry has now grown to 730 prisoners who send us messages all the time about the difference that our healing faith makes in their lives in the context of prison. And in this summer, when we're at General Assembly, we will be near one of our largest numbers of Unitarian Universalists in prison in Angola. Ours is also a communal saving faith. Again, through Church of the Larger Fellowship, we have seen how the offerings for people of color and for Black Unitarian Universalists to gather through networks online across our association for covenant circles, for worship, and for organizing has been so powerful. How do I know this? Because it has been testified to us time and again, the difference that this ministry makes to people of color in our movement. Ours is a personal saving faith, a community and communal experience of a saving faith. And also, we see the healing power when we say yes to the risks that love demands of us, not only in our institutions, when we seek to become anti-racist, anti-oppressive institutions, but also on the streets together. So often our congregations and communities are the first to respond to fast-breaking ethical issues of the day. Where I serve, and probably where many of you are, we were the first to open our doors in support of LGBTQ rights. In our case, we started that work in 1972. In our case, too, we've been called out into the streets, out towards movements of justice around immigration justice, for example, which is also an example of ministry and justice work that affects Black lives. We had a mayor who sought to deport immigrants as fast as possible and responded and overturned hateful policies. All of us are engaged in critical life-saving work when we say yes. Yes to igniting faith. Yes to empowering change. Yes to advancing justice. Or more simply put, yes to leading with love.
Thank you, Alison. And now we'll hear from the Reverend Susan Frederick-Gray.
Good morning. I'm Susan Frederick-Gray. I'm a lifelong Unitarian Universalist, formed in congregations all across this country. I've been a part of our congregations in all 5 regions. I've served in ministry capacities for the past 18 years. The last 9 years, I've served in Phoenix, Arizona, the UU Congregation of Phoenix. I'm heartbroken, friends. When this campaign began, I said, this is a defining moment. This was more than a year ago that this campaign began. And I said, this is a defining moment. This is also a heartbreaking time that we are living in. When this campaign began, we were talking about the health of our congregations and how we might grow our faith and move it forward to reach more generations of people. Today, we're thinking about how to defend our democracy, how to defend religious freedom, how to protect ourselves and our neighbors. Daily, we are inundated with news of new efforts and new policies from our national administration that are literally attacking and destroying the earth, communities of color, the lives and health and bodies of women and people of color and the poor. And in this moment, when we look to our faith, we want to see hope and leadership and a different way of being in the world. The systems of white supremacy, of American supremacy, of militarism and violence and domination are larger than any one of us. But they also live deeply within us and within our institutions. We cannot deny that and see what is unfolding across our country. We cannot deny the persistence of white and American supremacy, nor the attacks that it makes on our world and on our lives, and especially and in particularly on the lives of people of color. Nine years ago, when I accepted the call to be the minister of the UU Congregation of Phoenix, I knew that I would be working on immigration justice as I had been in Ohio. What I didn't know was that the unconstitutional and terrorizing practices of Sheriff Joe Arpaio were about to become not only codified in state law, but through copycat legislation quickly spread across the country. Laws that separate parents from their children and that leave children orphaned at the hands of our state. In that moment, we were called as Unitarian Universalists not just to be allies, but accomplices in the struggle for justice led by undocumented, young, queer people of color. Of course, we are asking of ourselves more, because right now, in this moment, we are being called to be our bravest, our boldest, our most loving and generous and open selves. We have been readying for this time. We are up to it. Let us answer that call to love, to justice, to vitality.
Thank you, Susan. And now we're going to our question period, which will be 2 minutes for each candidate, and we're rotating who goes first. And so, Alison, I think you have the first question, and it is this. In the wake of President Morales' resignation and the patterns of institutional racism that are seen by many in our hiring and leadership practices, what is your pastoral advice for our people at this troubling time?
I wrote in my response, even before Peter chose to step down, that we have at least 2 associations, if not more than that. Some experienced this controversy around a recent hiring as the initiating of a crisis. Others in our movement have been long awake to the fact that racism has been rampant in our institution and that this crisis is not new. Part of the pastoral response is bringing these communities together to share their stories, to to understand how we got here, and to find a way out with clear plans for not only hiring more people of color at all levels of our association, but for changing the very system which blocks the voices coming from different parts of the beloved community. We must hear one another's stories, we must awaken to what is happening, and we must also tell the stories of the times when we have been able to lean into the struggle of anti-racism and anti-oppression and create change. The Leadership Council is a source of power and direction, but there's also a possibility for other councils across the association, for example, where priorities are moved forward, like priorities of anti-racism, with voices from every level of the association and all of our congregations. Power does not need to rely only in the hands of a circle of 11. We can say yes to becoming something new, and to listening and being led to voices of color who can help share new ways of organizing, living, and leading.
Thank you, Alison. And now we'll turn to the Reverend Susan Frederick-Gray to the same question. I'll read it again. In the wake of President Morales' resignation and the patterns of institutional racism that are seen by many in our hiring and leadership practices, what is your pastoral advice for our people at this troubling time?
My pastoral advice is to keep listening. As you know, to white Unitarian Universalists, myself included, if you feel defensive, try to name that and let it go. Stay in the pain, keep listening. Remember that we are a covenanted community, and that our covenant reminds us that we're not perfect, that we will fall down, that we will fail and we will hurt each other. But that if we listen and we stay at the table and we stay in the storm of the pain without flinching, without defensiveness, but remain open, that there is much to be learned. None of us can do this work of anti-racism and counter-oppression alone. And there is much work that we as white people can do for this work. And much transformation and salvation and hope that is offered by being on the path. We already know that our faith calls us to a lifelong journey. And so my pastoral advice, stay at the table, listen with an open heart, keep listening, keep sharing, keep telling the truth from our people of color, to keep telling the truth and your truth. And we'll keep listening, learning together.
Thanks, Susan. The same question I'll present to the Reverend Jeanne Pupke. In the wake of President Morales' resignation and the patterns of institutional racism that are seen by many in our hiring and leadership practices, what is your pastoral advice for our people at this troubling time?
I don't want to give you pastoral advice. I want to name the prophetic in the moment. Because though it would be great to give everyone comfort, let's not. Let's be disturbed. Let's lean forward into this moment and be brave together. Do you need to hold hands? Hold hands. We cannot pretend that lighting a chalice and hanging out as a lot of white folk is going to get it done. People have been deeply, deeply injured. People have come and asked for a new consciousness. Let us use this as a moment of deep accountability. This is the best moment we have had in 50 years. Let us treasure it as sacred, and let us be unafraid to go forward. This is a moment of radical opportunity and hope, and we must see it for that and laugh about our discomfort, because we will shed it and we will commit to this work together. The pastoral moment goes to the people of color and the communities that have been marginalized. It goes to our young people who are stunned. It goes to our staff, which has been trying to do good work and feels now just dismissed. It goes to our congregations that feel they don't have enough money to do the work. But friends, there is enough, and we can do this.
Thank you, Jeanne. The next question first goes to Susan, and it is this. I can find it. What is the role of the UUA and the role of individual congregations regarding the movement for Black lives?
The role of the UUA and our congregations and the movement for Black lives is to be in partnership with that movement, accomplices with that movement, allies to that movement. In our local congregations, it means the work of the conversations around unpacking white privilege, understanding racism and the way it persists in our communities. It is the work of putting up our banners, but it is also beyond that. It is the work of developing deep coalition and partnership with communities of color who are defining the strategies and leading the way in confronting systematic oppression, incarceration, and attacks on them, on their bodies and on their lives. This is the same with the UUA. Collaboration, partnership, really being invested and deeply committed and working alongside communities of color who are struggling for justice in this moment, who are resisting these policies that are attacking their lives. This is where we are called to be. One of the things I reflected on in my leadership in Phoenix, where we have more than a 10-year partnership with Puente Human Rights Movement, which is led by undocumented young people of color, is that those partnerships have shaped my leadership in ways that never could have happened on my own or even solely within our UU congregations. So we need to be turning our faith and our work inside out. None of us is going to fight what's happening in this time alone. So how do we partner more effectively and collaboratively and more deeply in our local communities as well as on the national level?
Thank you, Susan. So the question to Jeanne then is, what is the role of the UUA and the role of individual congregations regarding the movement for Black lives?
I want to start with the fact that the UUA can only do what the congregations will allow. That's been forgotten sometimes. Our congregations are struggling with our separation on this issue. We're trying to hang our individual banners or not, or have our discussions or not. But Black Lives Matter is one manifestation of the work of justice calling us to anti-racism, anti-oppression, and the building of multicultural communities. As such, it it should be partnered with the work of the Moral Mondays from Reverend Barber in North Carolina, who stands valiantly against the powers and principalities of a state hijacked against the will of its own people, against the rights of voters, against the public good in education, housing, and of course, just simply in the right to raise their voices. There are many prongs to the movement toward AR-AO-MC, and the UUA can create great programs. But the heart of the challenge is that all of us must be brave enough to demand that each of our congregations overtly stand up and say, we are an anti-racist community. We stand with marginalized communities, and we will not be turned away.
Thank you, Jeanne. So the question to you, Alison, what is the role of the UUA and the role of individual congregations regarding the movement for Black lives?
So I want to answer this in light of the question that I'm running for president. And one of the most powerful things that a president can do is allocate resources, financial resources, and allocate the resources of the organization towards something. So as a congregational leader, what that's looked like in Morristown has been looking to the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement in Morristown and asking them what they've needed. And they have been looking for space and been turned away. And so they've been meeting in our congregation for many months now, planning and organizing for the needs of our community. And in our case, they have an eye towards investing in the next generations, towards education, and towards dismantling the new Jim Crow, and working for changes around police brutality and around the number of people incarcerated. At the CLF, as chair of the board, it has looked like empowering one of our superstar staff, Lena, to use her time, and Meg, the minister, senior minister, and I have talked about this, saying yes to using our precious lean staff resources to empowering her work on the streets with Black Lives Matter Minneapolis and St. Paul region. At the Unitarian Universalist Association, it looks like supporting the Black lives of Unitarian Universalists, supporting our congregations and equipping them to be partners across the country, and looking at everything that we offer in the association. What about our worship resources? So often, it is a litany of readings and music that is a communion of white saints. What would it look like to really invest in Black lives, creative lives, who are Unitarian Universalists, generating music and words of inspiration and hope across the association? One example of how our programming needs to change to support Black lives.
Thank you, Alison. Moving on to the next question, and Jeanne, this will go to you first, and it's a three-part. How are you dismantling your own white supremacy? How will you help the UUA dismantle its own white supremacy? How will you help congregations and congregants to dismantle their white supremacy?
I like this question.
Yeah. I thought you might.
So I'm going to pull out of my wallet, and I'm a lesbian, so I carry my wallet in my pocket. Just saying. This is the Richmond Pledge, and I read it every day. It hangs on my mirror in my bathroom. I believe that every person has worth as an individual. I believe that every person is entitled to dignity and respect, regardless of color. I believe that every thought and every act of racial prejudice is harmful, and if it is my thought or act, then it is harmful to me as well as to others. Therefore, from this day forward, I will strive daily to eliminate racial prejudice from my thoughts and actions. I will discourage racial prejudice by others at every opportunity. I will treat all people with dignity and respect. I will commit to working with others to transform the greater Richmond region into a place that treats all people of all races, ethnicities, and cultures with justice, equity, and compassion, and I will strive daily to honor this pledge, knowing that the world will be a better place because of my effort. And the founders of the Richmond Pledge are my congregation, and the leaders are seated right over there, and they hold me to it.
Thank you, Jeanne. So to Alison, the same three-part question. How are you dismantling your own white supremacy? How will you help the UUA dismantle its white supremacy? How will you help congregations and congregants dismantle white supremacy?
2 minutes, right?
2 minutes. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Don't start the clock yet. I've been chattering.
My journey around racial justice began seriously 20 years ago as a young adult, when I had the benefit of a time when Unitarian Universalists were involved in trainings where a leader of color and a leader who identified as white went out into our congregations and our communities to really talk about institutional racism and our role in changing the structures of the places in which we reside. And there's so many leaders. Paula Cole-Jones in this region is someone that inspires me deeply and has been tirelessly at this work, whether she's paid or not. This is a continuing journey on my part. And as president, I will be a president who, again, will allocate resources towards the dismantling of racism and understanding the role of white privilege. We have a Journey Towards Wholeness transformation team at the center, but they are no longer networked across the association with networks in the regions and the congregations. We need to build up those networks so that we have common language and a power analysis of what is happening, a power map of what is happening, so we can see it, we can face it, and we can begin to make critical changes. And the last thing I want to mention is that part of the journey of owning white privilege is being surrounded by leaders of color in my congregation and the communities in which I serve. And I look to them for guidance as to how we form the resistance to the hate that is being targeted towards the most vulnerable and oppressed in our community, and being willing to lean into my discomfort around what they've determined is the right actions, and to going alongside of them and to saying yes, yes, yes to what love demands.
Thanks, Alison. Susan, the same question to you. How are you dismantling your own white supremacy? How will you help the UUA dismantle its own white supremacy? How will you help congregations and congregants to dismantle white supremacy?
One of the most significant things I've done to help dismantle some of the white supremacy within me is when I chained myself along with 5 people of color to Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail, to shut the jail down and to stop him from doing raids on Latino neighborhoods and taking parents and grandparents away from their kids. Several months after that event, I was reflecting with a minister of color in our faith who was talking about coming to Phoenix, and as a person of color, when she came to Phoenix and she put on her Standing on the Side of Love shirt, she said, "I feel safe because you can tell I'm with a group of people and I'm organized." And I said, "That's interesting. Now when I put on my Standing on the Side of Love shirt, I feel unsafe. I feel like a target, because I'm showing myself to be in imperfect words, a race traitor, right? I'm showing myself to be not a part of supremacy and fighting against it. But that experience of having police officers on my tail more frequently, by my house, those experiences of really confronting the systems of injustice and oppression and supremacy, that was part of my experience. So what to do as the UUA president? First of all, we need to put anti-racism, counter-oppression at the forefront and center of our vision of who we are called to be as a people of faith. Then we need to invest and deepen our resources for training for our congregations and for our UUA staff around counter-oppression and anti-racism. If we don't put that at the forefront and we do not invest in it, it will not happen.
Thank you, Susan. Noisy little thing, isn't it? Thank you. Alison, we're going to start with you. It's working. And this is a little long question, so listen up. Are you aware of efforts to incorporate an 8th UU principle? And where does this rank among goals you want to achieve in your role as UUA president? And I'm going to read you the language that's been proposed. Members and congregations of the UUA affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community that accountably dismantles racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions.
And the question is, how do I feel about that?
How do you feel about that? Are you aware of it, and
Yes.
how does it rank?
Yes, I am aware of it. I have seen it circulating online, and I've seen it circulated by some of the most respected long trainers in our association, like Jafia Christos Rogers. Again, people who've been committed to this work, whether the UUA has paid them or not. And I think it is time for us to have this kind of language in our 7 principles, or adding an 8th. I think the question of, it's very important in covenantal language. The process is just as important as what the ultimate words are. I think it is a healthy thing for our association to talk about what we mean in covenantal language by our commitment to anti-racism and anti-oppression across the association, in our individual lives and in our congregations. And so I want to invite the entire association to be engaged in that process, whether it lands as an 8th principle or whether the 7 principles are changed. I thought it was too bad that we didn't have the courage to change the language in our 7 principles, which I find precious too as a lifelong UU. But what we know in our congregations is if that we don't create a strategic vision and covenantal language that invites the newest folks, oftentimes people of the last decade haven't had the chance to participate in it, then the words don't sing like they do when we delve deeply into the work of creating covenant. So yes, I am aware of this movement for an 8th principle, and I support including language like this in our principles, however many we wind up with.
Thank you, Alison. Susan, the same question to you. Are you aware of efforts to incorporate an 8th UU principle, and where does this rank among goals you want to achieve in your role as UUA president? Do you want me to read the 8th principle language?
So I am just, I'm only briefly aware of this, and I'm excited for the conversation, and I would support this inclusion in order to be a clear and compelling call to us about how to move forward and who we're called to be. There are 3 parts of my vision for the Unitarian Universalist Association: spiritual vitality, being grounded in partnership and collaboration, and being organized for impact. And I want to talk about organized for impact because, as Jeanne said earlier, the UUA president can't do anything unless the congregations say so. When we decided to have the first ever Justice GA in Phoenix, we said we would not do business as usual because we wanted to make an impact. Our business as usual is no longer serving us. My power analysis of the UUA is that we disperse power in such confusing ways that it is hard to actually move forward an agenda. It's hard to have accountability around decisions because power is so dispersed. And it allows folks who have a lot of influence to move the system. But those who do not have a lot of influence cannot move the system. It disempowers leadership and it protects a status quo. I think that's why we didn't approve a national conversation on race last year at General Assembly. So, I would love to see a new principle, but the last time we tried to make changes in our principles, it was soundly defeated, even though a team had worked for 4 years to bring about those changes. The way we do business is not serving the vision that we have for our faith or the ways that we need to move forward. So we also have to be willing to let go of how we've always done things and empower leadership to call us forward in these moments. So, yes, and it's more difficult than that.
Thank you, Susan. Same question to you, Jeanne. Are you aware of the efforts to incorporate an eighth principle, and where does this rank among goals you'd want to achieve as president?
Good. So I was the one on the board who proposed that we not do business as usual. I did that because in our own congregation we decided to not do business as usual, and it worked brilliantly. If you haven't been to the last 2 General Assemblies or had the opportunity to watch the video, you should watch the last days of both of those General Assemblies, because I'm going to tell you right now, we came close to recreating the disaster of the late 60s empowerment crisis. As far as our youth are concerned, we did. Friends, we cannot do this. We cannot fail to stand up for something like the eighth principle. In fact, let me give you a little bit of ministry subversion here, okay? This is a technique that ministers use. I'm going to confess it here. Just recently, I created a memo with some language on what we should do about some ends, and could we change this to that? And I said, take the 7 out in front of the principles, because I didn't want to have to redo it. We can do the eighth principle. Let me tell you, if you elect me, we will do this eighth principle, I assure you, because we will do the work necessary to see it come to fruition in everyone's consciousness. The truth of the matter is that dismantling racism needs an overt statement from us. There is an ends statement that the board, several of them, that the board embraces. But just to show you how slippery it all is, until we put it in our highestly revered documents, somebody can make an argument, or as Nancy MacDonald Ladd would say, a fake fight. No fake fights.
Thank you, Jeanne. Moving on, and Susan, I think you have the first time here. Nope, Alison, excuse me.
Was I first last week?
We just finished that round, yes?
I was just first.
It's Susan now, I think.
I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Okay.
But I am sometimes. Alison, the question to you.
No, it's for me.
For Susan.
It's Susan. Susan, help me here.
We're helping you.
Thanks a lot. I need all the help I can get.
That was a good energy break. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't wait for one of you to be the next president. Should be interesting board meetings, don't you think?
There'll be great board meetings, won't they? We're going to have great board meetings.
I have no doubt.
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
It is 2019 and the UUA is experiencing a budget shortfall. What are your top 3 budget priorities? Why do you choose these 3?
The work of justice. and anti-racism is one of those top 3 priorities. Because it's what's needed. And helping our congregations figure out how to do that work better and devoting more resources to organizing in this kind of work is a priority. Making sure that transitions has the resources it needs, because that is the way that our association most directly relates. It is the most frequent relationship that the UUA has with our congregations is transition and ministerial settlements. That has to be done well because that builds the trust and the relationship with the association for further resources. Standing on the side of love. I said the justice work, but to be more specific, I think the work of standing on the side of love is so critical in this time. We have to really be aware of the moment that we're in and how we're being called and how we can respond faithfully in this time. And so those are the 3 priorities. Although I also would say that it's important to be, even facing a budget shortfall, to understand the mission that you're being called to and figuring out how to live that mission. Regardless, figuring out how to increase the resources. As one of our church finance people says, we don't have an expense problem, we have an income problem. So I also feel like the president needs to tackle the income problem so that we're resourced well for the mission that we are being called to. And that's actually my top priority. I guess given that circumstance, my number 1 priority would be going out to raise more money.
Thank you, Susan. Jeanne, same question to you. In 2019, the UUA is experiencing a 15% budget shortfall. What are your top 3 budget priorities, and why? Why do you choose those?
We don't have to wait to 2019. It's here now. All right? So the very first thing I'll say before I do the priorities is this. This is the time when every congregation ought to give its full, fair share to the Unitarian Universalist Association without withholding. And if you can't do it this year, in the next 2, you ought. We need your love, support, and accountability. Secondly, the highest priority for me would be to begin the work of training and reorganizing along the lines of the ends that are most important. And right now, can there be any question but that we must be organized to be an ARAOMC organization, which is to reorganize. Look at my logo. My logo has all these different colors coming together at intersections that create new growth. That's there for a reason, friends. We need to come into the 21st century in our organizational design, out of functionality, out of narrow concerns, and into a recognition of the diverse and intersectional nature of all the injustice and the needs of our congregations. So that would be first, the decentralization of the UUA to be in the field with the congregations, and then to begin a clearer, more articulate messaging of who we are and what we do, to set free the people whose good work is being held back by unnecessary control, to bring to the world the beauty of our faith. These are my 3 priorities.
Thank you, Jeanne. And Alison, the same question to you. The UUA is experiencing a budget shortfall. What are your top 3 budget priorities and why?
As I've been traveling across the association and meeting with Unitarian Universalists in different congregations, so many people are sharing that their number 1 challenge is in stewardship. And so I would prioritize fundraising at the UUA and also trainings and equipping lay leaders at the congregational level to achieve their fundraising goals. I believe so often when the UUA dues are slashed, it's because people feel like they have to make challenging choices between staff and the UUA. And so I think stewardship needs to be a priority right now, and that comes up because of my development experience. It naturally comes up. So that would certainly be a clear priority at the UUA and partnering with congregations. A second priority is connected to the fact that right now much of the UUA's work has been at the center around the move and around restructuring from districts to regions. We absolutely need to be supporting ministry in the field. Our congregations and covenanted communities are the engines. Most people don't show up at 24 Farnsworth if they're curious about Unitarian Universalism. They show up in a place like here at Cedar Lane. We need to prioritize equipping and working together to create resources for dynamic, vibrant worship and lifelong religious education programs that help us live into the multicultural, multi-generational, multiracial, and religiously plural future that truly offers something different than most other houses of worship in our landscape. Many people talk about choosing between the Methodist Church and the Unitarian Universalist Church because the pastor's a good preacher. That is the perspective usually of someone who's been raised Christian. That is not the perspective of everyone going to our congregations. And finally, I would want to focus again on standing on the side of love, but actually empowering our congregations to be involved in holistic social justice, which involves community organizing, education, really building up networks like the legislative ministries for legislative advocacy and equipping congregations to do the work.
Thank you, Alison. Jeanne, going to go to you first. It's a little long, so listen up. Like they would listen to me. In your estimation, how much of the UUA president's job is administrative and operational, likened to that of a CEO of a large organization, as opposed to being our public voice in the world? What in your own experience prepares you for that job? And in light of that, please describe how you will manage, rely on, or supervise the senior staff.
You know, I've been a CEO, and I've been a leader of a church. I've been a leader of growth organizations. My church, when I arrived in Richmond, was 410 good souls, and it's now, 11 years later, 700 plus. I didn't do that. They did it. If I'm elected president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, I won't do it then either. They will do it. We will do it. Friends, I want to liberate the UUA. I want to relate deeply to each congregation. I want us to knit ourselves into a commonwealth of congregations. And there are such good people at the Unitarian Universalist Association. Let me say that again. There are such good people at the Unitarian Universalist Association who work hard, who love the faith, and who right now could use a kind word from us.
Amen.
Even in their imperfection, which, resembles our imperfection. So I want to say that I want to build the trust with the association members, with the staff, the leaders, the lay leaders, the donors. And I don't want a clock that says you must do this now and that now. I want to raise 1,000 voices to speak for our faith, not just my own. So the question of the hierarchical perspective, not me. I'm a team leader, and that's how I'll lead.
Thank you, Jeanne. Alison, the question to you as well. In your estimation, how much of the UUA president's job is administrative and operational, likened to that of a CEO, as opposed to being our public voice in the world? What experience prepares you for that job, coming from your local congregation? And in light of that, how you will manage, rely on, supervise the senior staff.
So I think there are 4 main aspects to the president's job. They are a spiritual leader in our denomination, among other spiritual leaders. They are the voice of our faith in the world, a voice for justice, among other voices. They are the CEO who partners with the COO, or before that, the executive vice president, and all of the leads at the UUA and at every level of the association. And they are a primary partner in terms of fundraising with the development department. I have had the blessing of being involved and truly feel called to institutional change, to leading institutional change. I've had the blessing of serving on nonprofit startups, opening a worker center, launching the first online ministry in our association that served Unitarian Universalists. I've had the blessing on serving on a $16 million nonprofit that actually refounded itself. I was on the founding board that moved from an organization that worked with donors, really catered to the donors, to enlisting the donors and being accountable to the communities that we wish to serve, and really transforming that institution into one that of a charity pass-through to community impact, and I'd be happy to share more of that story. I have served, as I said, congregations of all sizes and emerging ministries, and I will take all of that experience and work with the staff. I've served in various positions in RE, administration, ministry, development, even caretaking for the building. And so I am a team leader who appreciates all the gifts of everyone in the team and will be guided by the wisdom at all levels and move us forward towards becoming a more nimble Unitarian Universalist association.
Thank you, Alison. So, Susan, looking at my notes. Same question to you. In your estimation, how much of the UUA president's job is administrative and operational, likened to that of a CEO, as opposed to being our public voice in the world? What, in your own experience, prepares you for that job? And in light of that, how would you manage, rely on, or supervise the senior staff?
I would break the UUA president's job into 3 parts. First is the national pastoral and prophetic voice for our faith. The second is the administrative roles in setting the culture at the UUA. And the third is the chief fundraiser and raising the resources for the mission that we are being called to. The questions about administration. The UUA does not need a better manager. We need a clear and compelling vision for our faith at this time, and a leader to help amplify all of our voices, to have an association that is amplifying the work of our local congregations and the leadership that we are providing all across the country. One of the things the president does, so it's not the daily management, but the president's job is to set a culture for the association, and we need to adopt a more collaborative way of operating that strengthens the relationships of the president and the UUA with our identity-based ministries as well as with communities beyond our association. That kind of leadership of being deeply in partnership across and beyond our faith is one of the gifts I would bring. I've been doing leadership and management for a long time. My first job at 13 years old was as a Little League umpire, managing coaches and their behaviors far more than the little ones. I had a brief time in genetic research. I have an undergraduate degree in molecular biology. I worked for, wait for it, Monsanto. I know. And my second position with Monsanto was as a supervisor. And I could have been on that path to management there, but the call of ministry was deep inside of me. The other thing, so I've served as senior minister, solo minister, and lead minister of 2 congregations, Youngstown, Ohio, Rust Belt City, Phoenix, Arizona. In both of those ministries, I've increased pledge giving by 50% and grown those congregations by over 30%. So I take seriously that my job is to raise the resources for the ministry to happen, and for the staff and the leaders to have the resources to do the ministries they are called to and that our congregations need.
Thank you, Susan. This will be, we only have time for one more question before we go to our closing remarks. And Alison, I'll turn to you for this one. I'm curious if the candidates have given any in-depth thought to a more evangelical approach to congregational growth, specifically by focusing on small house church or 1950s era fellowship communities. Relatedly, what are their thoughts about educating UU clergy and lay leaders to consider becoming congregational planters rather than simply plugging into what already exists?
I love this question. My congregation is a product of that 1950s fellowship movement and planting, and we're the second largest church in the state of New Jersey and won a growth award because we're the largest we've ever been. I think we have actually fallen away too much from planting new ministries in our congregations and also planting emerging ministries where there are opportunities that are ripe around the country and actually around the globe. This is something that I think we need to turn our attention towards once again, and I think there's an opportunity to link this with our objectives around serving communities of color and reflecting on where we plant these ministries. When as part of my work at the association, I was fundraising for grants for congregations to be able to hire new staff to reach out to new populations. I have been part of planting campus ministries across this association with others. If we are not, and I think it's important to hear this, if we are not planning for growth, then we are planning for decline. All of us that serve in congregations know that there needs to be a healthy amount of growth, even to maintain our communities. And why? Not growth for growth's sake, but because Unitarian Universalism is a life-saving faith. We hear that testified to over and over again from young adults and elders who show up and say, "Why didn't I hear about this sooner?" So we need to invest in new places to help people find out who we are. I know we shy away from proselytizing, but what about publicity, folks? People are asking us for this very thing. And so I'm excited to work with entrepreneurial ministers and lay leaders who are already imagining new projects for our association and bringing resources to bear.
Thank you, Alison. So, Susan, the same question. Have you given any in-depth thought to a more evangelical approach to congregational growth, specifically focusing on small house church or 50s era fellowship communities? And relatedly, what are your thoughts about educating UU clergy and lay leaders to consider becoming planters rather than simply plugging into what already exists?
Yes, I think we need to embrace a more evangelical spirit within our congregation and within our own hearts in how we share and speak and invite people to our communities and to our faith. With respect to church planting, I may have an answer you don't like. My husband is also a minister, although not a Unitarian Universalist minister. Over the past 20 years, his denomination has poured a lot of resources into church planting and new church starts. And while they tout the success of that, they've closed even more churches than they've started. I believe we have to begin with the health and vitality of the congregations that we have. I believe that we have to be focused on living our mission first and not be about just growth, but really making a difference in people's lives, in the lives of our families and our children, and in the wider world. That must come first, and unlocking our power and attention to make a difference in the world, that's why we are here. That comes first. I think we need to pay attention to the innovative ways that people are trying to share and grow our faith that are not in tradition, that are not brick and mortar buildings, How can we see what is going successfully and invest there with movements and communities that are growing from the ground? How do we amplify that work and support that work? If we're not about mission, it doesn't matter how many congregations we have. And we're living in an age, sometimes I think about the phrase being religious in an irreligious age. So the beginning is mission, making a difference in the world. In Phoenix, that has fed some of our growth, but growth wasn't our goal. Making Arizona a more just community for everyone who lives there was our goal. That's where my heart and where I think we need to be focused.
Thank you, Susan. Jeanne, to you the same question. Have you given any thought to a more evangelical approach to congregational growth, specifically on house church or 50s era fellowship communities? And what are your thoughts about educating UU clergy and lay leaders to consider becoming planters rather than plugging into what already exists?
Why, yes, Jim, I have.
I thought you might have.
We didn't grow by 70% in this congregation by accident. And in the last congregation I served, we grew by 92.5% or something while I was there. Growth is possible, people. 0.0004. Do you know what that is? That's our share of the population of the United States. So let's not delude ourselves that we're sailing some great ocean liner across the seas. The truth of the matter is that always our best evangelism has been our witness in the public square, the fact that we can be counted on when times are difficult, the fact that we have a history of unique moments, not continuous, but unique moments where we were brave and bold and came to proclaim truth. We despair of what our prospects are, but friends, I tell you, if you do the work of multiculturalism, you can turn that around. In fact, in my own congregation, we struggle with this question, how to be present to the world in a way that makes our congregation like the community we reside within. This is the challenge all of us face. But here's a little thing for you to think about. There's a young minister in our movement who shall remain nameless, who does this good work, who tries to organize, who teaches other people, who travels to try to encourage this. And sometimes it's tough for him to pay his mortgage. So I have to say, whoever asked the question and whoever said, yeah, we want to do that, see me afterward about writing checks and spending time and making commitment.
Thank you, Jeanne, and thanks to all the candidates for taking some pretty tough questions and with good responses all. We'll now go to our closing statements by each. They each have 4 minutes, and we'll begin with Susan.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jim, and fellow candidates. So I've talked a lot about collaboration and partnership, talked about organized for impact, which means putting mission first and then asking how are we going to get there, not how have we always done this. I want to end by talking about spiritual vitality. This is some time we are in. I've been reflecting over the fact that our globe, our planet, has never been more connected than it is right now. Through social media and the internet, we can know in an instant what's happening all across the planet. And yet in this moment, there is this rise of nationalism, this rise of xenophobia, not just in the United States, this rise of fear that is infecting all of our hearts to different degrees, I would believe. We are, first and foremost, religious communities. We are a people of faith. And in this moment of rising militarism, of destructive capitalism, of racism, we need to be doing the spiritual work of training our hearts for sacred, courageous love and resistance. Our faith is deeply rooted in the message that no one is outside the circle of love. No one is outside the circle of creation. How do we grow? How do we stretch our hearts to greater compassion, to more reflective, nurturing action in our world? I don't know what the future holds for us fully, friends, but I know we need one another. And I know we need a spiritual foundation for resiliency, for courage, and not to be taken over by fear, but to open our hearts into the expanse of the love that is at the center of our theology and our faith. I'm grateful for your attention to the election. If you're excited about my campaign, I hope you'll visit my table, sign up, follow the campaign, talk with me. I look forward to talking and hearing from you. I'm grateful for this faith. It's saved my life. It's made me who I am. And I know that even though we are in a difficult moment right now, that we have been readying for this and that we are up for it. I'm grateful to be on this journey with you.
Thank you, Susan. Jeanne, I would invite you to make your closing remarks.
Made a few notes. So the first thing I want to say is that I have at my table some brochures with the text of what I think we need to do in this moment. So pick it up, please, and find out about that. Second thing I want to say is that I think it does matter whether we have leadership in our movement. I think all the plans and all the hopes and all the dreams we might have need skill. They need leadership. They need people who will not turn around in difficult times. I have shown in my life that this is what I do. I have led change in corporations, in organizations, as a lay leader, as a minister. And because of that, I know what we are facing. And I believe in our ability to make this moment valuable, a turning point. It's time that we show we have this honest commitment to anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism. It's time for the board to work closely with the president, to dream together. It's time for every congregation to take an honest assessment of where they are on the issues of anti-racism, authority, generosity. It's time for every committed UU to make a public statement about their commitment to being an anti-racist and to living with the uncomfortability of change. It's time for us to partner with communities of color and marginalized communities with accountability. And it's time for those who think that's not their call, who think this is not the time, who imagine that there is no such thing as racism, to find another home. I say that with love. I say that inviting them into the stories and the participation. But if we miss this opportunity, friends, I doubt our ability to survive. Now is the time. We had a campaign about that, didn't we? So I see you all, and you are the denizens of the Central East region, the JPD remnant, holy as you are. And if anyone doesn't believe it, just ask you. You do church good. You have one of the best places where Unitarian Universalism is alive. But if you think that's what's going on across the country and the globe, you're wrong. And if it's hard here, imagine how it is in Cheyenne. We need you. We need your leadership. We need the commitment. We need the example. We need the general history of delight that our faith can live, thrive, and grow. You are the remnant who can raise that truth. May it be so.
Thank you, Jeanne. Alison will give you the final words.
This is the region, and specifically the district, that nurtured my first ministry that I was leading as a young adult. Mainline Church in Devon, Pennsylvania, sent a lifeline out to students at Bryn Mawr and Haverford and offered to support us and offer rides. And that made a difference, to know that we mattered to our faith. And too often, we are not sending that message. And when we send it, and when we send it in strong ways, a liberating love ignites in people's hearts that truly leads them to make a difference, to change the way that they lead their daily lives and everything that they do in their communities around the globe. I want to partner with all of you in all of our work to ignite faith. I want the Unitarian Universalist Association and plan for the Unitarian Universalist Association to pay attention to what congregations are asking for and need. Over 1,000 of us hold worship on a Sunday or a Tuesday or whenever it happens, and yet we have only one fantastic 15-hour-a-week employee supporting that. At a time when so many lay leaders and ministers across the country are in need of training and resources to reimagine how we do things. Yes, it is time to do things differently. We need an association that partners with us in making our spirits come alive on Sunday and throughout the week in creative ways with online ministries and many other ways that we can engage with faith today. I am planning for a Unitarian Universalist Association that empowers change, that moves past just welcoming people on the margins to putting them in positions of leadership where they can help us plan a new landscape for our faith that includes all. We are called to create a spiritually alive, radically inclusive, justice-centered Unitarian Universalism. That is what a group of us planned for the young adult movement, many, many years ago, decades ago, and now we need to live into that for all. I also plan for a Unitarian Universalism that advances justice, that doesn't just say we stand on the side of love, but after the t-shirts and the banners are back home, equips all of us to create changes for the long haul. I'm on the board of the legislative ministry of New Jersey, and so many are looking to us because they're not getting hooked up to opportunities for deepening and growth in their justice ministries from our association, as much as I know our talented staff are capable of. Yes, the president supports public witness with their voice, but as head of staff can allocate resources to equip congregations to do the long haul work. Again, we could have a vision not just of planting congregations, but planting justice ministries. 23 congregations in New Jersey planted that legislative ministry of New Jersey, and we need the UUA to embrace its convening role and its inspiring role to actually create what's possible in our regions, and not just wait for people to call. It has to be more proactive than that. And when we are proactive, somebody on fire in New Jersey helped make that happen. We need to unleash all the people who are on fire at the UUA to make these things happen. Together, we can lead with love.
Thank you. I think you'll agree that we have 3 fine candidates, and now you have to choose and get some information about the election process. I want to thank our candidates, to be sure, for their responses. I want to thank you for being here, those of you that are following live. And I'll turn it back to our host.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, candidates. It's really a note of hope and appreciation for the future that you've created today, so it was much needed. Thank you. So, and to our region out there, we've been very DC-centric today, but we know you're out there and we love you, so can you guys turn towards the camera and wave? Yeah, everyone. All right, you're off to good work. So, people in this room, there's lunch. Remember, loaves and fishes. Also remember, please don't blame me. I'm really not good at food, even at my best of times, and this is not that time. So it's probably going to be great. What I'm going to ask you to do in a minute, not right now, is move towards the back to kind of get around, because we're going to set up some tables for folks to sit. Get some food, find a place to sit with a friend. Sit with a stranger, probably even better. There is a Joseph Priestley District Board meeting happening, I believe, in the library. If you have your little sheet, it'll say. If you want to ask questions or just talk to them, please attend that with your lunch. If you would like to stay for our 3 fabulous workshops, so that is about Mission Possible, Change and Hope in a Changing Environment with our Outreach Director, Carrie McDonald. If you want to talk about pastoral care in times of trouble with our CER staff member, Reverend David Pyle, or Stewardship for the 21st Century with Stewardship for Us consultant Bill Klontz, please stay and experience a little bit of extra learning on a day like today. Thank you. Lunchtime for all, and it's been wonderful to be together.